Welcome to another video in the Timco Retail Manager course. This course focuses on real-world application development. This is a series, so the way to get the most out of it is to start from the beginning and watch through in order. However, if you're just interested in the topic this video covers, that's fine too. Think of this series like a bunch of Lego bricks. Each is valuable on their own, but seeing them put together is even more valuable. In this video, we'll be setting up our coding environment by setting up a repository on GitHub, preparing our source control system to be used with Visual Studio, and getting these solutions started. Then make sure you're subscribed to this channel since more videos might appear in addition to the regularly scheduled video on Monday. Depending on the size of the video and my schedule, you might see an additional video or two appear throughout the week. Also, remember that if you're a Patreon supporter at the $5 per month level or higher, you'll be getting the source code for each video in this series as it comes out. So today's job is to get our repository set up for the Timco Retail Manager. And to do that, we're going to take advantage of something that was just released recently, and that's the free private repositories on GitHub. So if you go to github.com/new, and once you're logged in, the /new will take you to this page I have here. Now what we're going to do is create the Timco Retail Manager. Now you can follow along and give the exact same name because the owner will be different, and that's fine. Now I'm making this a private repository, so we'll check that box right there. And I'm going to give it a brief description. So a retail management system built by Timco Enterprise Solutions. That's private. We're also going to initialize it with a README. So what that does, it does two things for us. First of all, it creates a README. And a README is really helpful because it forces you to describe what your project is and what it does, or at least it tries to. The other thing it does, though, is it puts something in your repository. By doing that, it makes it easier to clone down to your computer. Now also, we're going to add a gitignore file. Now a gitignore file, what its job is to tell Git, which is our source control we're using, it's going to tell Git, hey, don't count these files. Leave these files out of it when you are figuring out which files to bring in. Okay, so in this case, we're going to ignore all of the temp files and all of the build files that come with Visual Studio. We don't want those in our repository. This is a very important step to get done first. That way you don't get files in your repository that you really don't want. So what we'll do is drop down here, and we're going to search for Visual Studio, all one word. And there it is, Visual Studio. And so what that does, it creates a Visual Studio gitignore file. And that just means that it knows what files Visual Studio creates that we don't want to upload. And so it puts those in the list of the gitignore. Also, we're going to add a license. Now you may say, well, what license would you put on here? And there's a whole list here. The most common are the ones in bold, but there's others as well. And if you're not sure, there's this little blue icon here. If you click on this, it's going to open up a new page and ask you some very basic questions. And if you answer these and say, okay, this is what I want, then that's the license you want. And so it explains it. If you want more details, you can click here and it will discuss what each different license does and how it does it, from most restrictive all the way down to the least restrictive. Now, it is very important that if you're doing an open source project, that you put some type of license on it. In our case, it's a closed source project, meaning I'm not authorizing you to just give this source code away or treat this source code as your own. I am going to allow you to use the source code and learn from it, but you can't just turn around and then just sell my source code as your own, okay? Or to give it away as open source then. But for this project, what I'll do is I'll just create and use this license right here, the GNU public general public license. Okay, it is a private project, so it really doesn't apply to you when you download source code, because it's actually a little bit more restrictive when you download the source code from Patreon, because there are some extra rules that go along with that. Okay, enough about that. Let's go ahead and create our repository. There we go. Our repository is created. Notice we have 1 commit, 1 branch, and 0 releases. So a commit is a bundle of changes. In this case, we have 3 things in that initial bundle: the gitignore file, the license file, and the readme file. The readme file, since this is GitHub, the way GitHub does it, and actually the way that Azure DevOps does it as well, is that if you have a readme.md file in the root of your project, it will display that as an HTML page. Now, MD files are Markdown files, and Markdown is a very simple way of creating HTML pages. And it's more for, not for creating websites, but more for creating documentation. And so if we actually click on the edit here, you'll see what we mean. Let's zoom in here. There we go. So as you can see, there's this pound sign and then a space, or you might call it the hashtag. That indicates that it's an H1 tag, or the first and the biggest header. If we want to make something bold, we would just put stars around it. So that's what Markdown is. It's a very quick way of making changes, and then we can preview those and see that they render like HTML. So it's a way of creating HTML quickly and easily, and it's used for basic highlighting of documents. So I'll cancel on that. We'll zoom back out a little bit and go back to our main page. Okay, so we have the 3 files in the 1 commit. If we look at the commits, there's our initial commit. And if we open that commit up, we'll see it actually has 3 changed files, basically 3 adds. The gitignore, and then if we keep scrolling, it's way down there, we'll see the license, Now, since we own this, we can make some changes. First of all, we can actually change things on the fly. Like if I hit edit and I were to actually make a change to this file, I could save that, it would create a new commit, and it would actually put the changes right into my repository on the master branch. However, we're not going to do a lot of that. Instead, we're going to bring all these changes down to our local machine and make changes there. Now, the way we're going to do that is by cloning. Now, this is very easy. The green button here says clone or download. If you just want to download source code to look at it, you can just download the zip file. Very easy. It just downloads the zip file. You can pop it open and even run the code. But in our case, we want to create a connection to this Timco Retail Manager. This is our Git repository. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this link. This is clone with HTTPS, which is the standard. So we'll click the copy button right next to this whole link here. Notice the link here says that it's github.com/timcorey, which is my name, then /timcoretailmanager.git. So I can just hit copy there, and that's going to copy that to my clipboard. Then what I can do is I can bring up the folder where I want to clone into. In this case, I've already opened it up to the D drive and demos. So I right click and say git bash here. Now, if you don't have Git installed, then you won't have this option. To install Git, you would just go to git-scm.com. and click the download. And this time it's 2.20.1. Whatever the latest version is, download that and install it. Follow the prompts when it asks you things. And if you're not sure on something, you can post a question down below. But essentially, just follow mostly the defaults. The only thing that I normally change, and I've already got it installed, so I can't really show you. The only thing I really change is I already have Notepad++ installed. And so when it asks about how I want to do, which editor to use, Notepad++ is one of the options. And I choose that over the standard one because the standard one's a little clunky, I think. So git-scm.com, download and install Git. Once you do, let's go back to our folder here. I have enabled it to say, to put my right-click menu, which is one of the options. I'm going to do a git bash here. Now, git bash is the command line. I could do git GUI here, but I'm not a big fan of their GUI. If you want a good GUI, there's a lot out there. Actually, Visual Studio has one built in. It's very nice. There's others as well if you think that you want to do something different. For example, Git Kraken, which is a Kraken, I believe. Git Kraken is another good option. There's others as well, including GitHub has their own that you can use if you want to. That's cross-platform. But I really like the command line for this work because it's quick. Now, some people get really freaked out about the command prompt and think, oh my God, I've got to use all these new commands, and it's just so archaic. The reality is the command prompt is quick. And for doing quick tasks, it's the most effective. Now, I don't use it for everything. I just use it for certain things. So let's do git bash here. And that brings up my bash window right here. And it's already in demos. Now, it looks a little bit different because it's not the Windows prompt that you're used to. You can open up the command prompt or even PowerShell and run some of the same tools as long as Git is on your path. However, I like this because it does show me a little bit extra beyond what the command prompt does. It shows you what branch I'm on, other things like that. So I use git bash. So we're going to say git, git, space, clone, and then paste in our string. In this case, this is my string. Now, it's a private repository. You can't use the same string. You got to use your own. So probably the only thing that's going to change is this right here. It'll be whatever your GitHub name is. And if you change the name of your project, that would change here. Okay? But whatever I copied from GitHub, that's what you paste in here. And then I hit enter. And it's going to clone into a new folder called the Timco Retail Manager. If you notice, I now have a new folder here called Timco Retail Manager. If I were to bring back my bash and say cd and say Timco Retail Manager, notice now once I go in here, it says master because it knows this is a Git repository and we're on the master branch. So it knows that, and that's one of the benefits that this git bash provides me with. And if I want to, I can say git status. And it says you're on branch master. Your branch is up to date with origin/master. There's nothing to commit and your working tree is clean. Essentially, you're starting at ground zero. There's nothing to do yet. Now, the one thing it's done for us when I did the git clone is it added this origin/master. What that is our remote repository. In this case, it's GitHub. So it said GitHub is origin. Actually, origin more specifically is the Timco Retail Manager repository. That's origin. And then master is saying that this master branch right here is connected to the master branch on origin, which that's all we have is master right now. So those two are connected. That means when I want to pull down changes, let's do git pull to pull new changes, which there are none. It knows where to pull them from because the default is origin. And the default branch is master because that's what's linked to this local master. So git pull. And it says are up to date. Now, I'm not going to go full in depth on Git. We're going to use just enough for what we need. But if you want to get more in depth on Git, I do have a video on this channel about Git specifically. And so you might want to watch that video and refresh yourself. Git is something that is used across the industry. It's the most popular source control method, and source control is really important in the real world. So I definitely recommend that you understand and know how to use source control. Now, since I'm a single developer working on my own, I'm not going to use Git heavily in this course. And that's just because I'm alone. But as you get into a larger environment, you'll need to use more and more Git skills. This will get you started. Okay? So with that being said, let's close this out. And now we have our repository set up. We have our README started. There's not a lot here yet. And we'll make some tweaks to it probably before we're done. In fact, let's do that. Let's do that once we create our solution. Now, I'm not going to create projects at this point, but I'm going to create my Visual Studio solution so that we can have something started and ready for us when we want to start adding projects. So what I'll do is I'll start Visual Studio. We're actually going to put it right inside the solution, right inside this folder. And I'll show you how to do that. So let's bring Visual Studio over. And we'll do a File, New Project. Now we say project, but I'm not actually going to create a project yet. I'm going to create an empty solution. So you can find that it's down here under, I believe, there you go. Other project types, Visual Studio Solutions, blank solution. So it's interesting that you don't actually find it under C# because it's not really a C# project because it's pretty much language agnostic at this point. You can put any language you want into it. So blank solution. You can also search for up here and just say blank solution. It'll come up. Now, this is a little weird because it says name and solution name, but you can only modify name. And that's because it's actually modifying the solution name, which they reuse this box. And so it makes it a little bit awkward, but I think it'll be fine. So we're going to call this the Timco Retail Manager, which if you notice is the same as what this folder is called. And that's the same as our repository. That's going to make life easy for us because now I can say this actually goes into d:/demos. And make sure I have this create directory for solution. So what that does is it's going to create the Timco Retail Manager directory and put my solution inside of it. But wait, I already have a Timco Retail Manager directory. Nope, not a problem. It's going to put it inside this folder. So it doesn't recreate the folder. It just uses the folder if it exists. If it does not, it creates it. So what this does is if I had put d:/demos/Timco Retail Manager down here and then said use directory for solution, it would actually create another folder inside of my Git folder, one level deeper that says Timco Retail Manager. So now you have a folder called Timco Retail Manager. Inside there is a folder called Timco Retail Manager. I've seen that a lot. It's one of those things that happens. It's not a big deal, but it makes it a little bit cleaner if you don't have to do that. So we hit OK. And there we go. We have our blank solution. If we bring this back up, notice that the Timco Retail Manager.sln file is now inside of our Timco Retail Manager folder. We don't have a duplicate folder. Also notice we have this hidden, and it might be a little small here. Let's zoom in. There we go. So notice that we have this hidden .vs file. We also have a hidden folder and a hidden .git folder. Now I've got my hidden folders shown so you can see them. Normally you wouldn't see this if you didn't have your hidden folders shown. The .git folder, this one right here, that's where all of the Git stuff is housed. Leave it alone. Don't mess with it. Don't change it. Leave it alone. Git will do its thing. It's not a very big folder. And even though it houses a number of different versions of your application with different branches and stuff like that, it's actually very, very lean. So you don't have to worry about this being too large. If you ever wanted to remove an item from source control locally, just delete that folder. That's it. You're done. Now the .vs folder, the one right here, that folder is created by Visual Studio, and it's a settings folder. It's where it stores your personal settings about this project and solution. That's not something you want in source control. So if you do a git commit, or a git status, and you see that as one of the changes, the .vs, you want to modify your git ignore file to ignore .vs folders. Now let's zoom back out and let's open up the .git ignore real quick. All right, and there the font's a little bigger for you. So if we notice in here, this is our git ignore folder file that the look over those if you want, but those are the important ones. Okay. So let's pop back open our git bash. And I'm going to do it here, and then I'll do it over here in Team Explorer. So let's do it here first, git status. And it says we're on our branch, up to date, yada, yada. But then up here it says untracked files. Use git add and the file name to include in what will be committed. And right now we have one file, and that's the Timco Retail Manager.sln. Notice it did not pick up the .vs folder because that's in the git ignore. Now you could do a git add and then this name right here, and that would add it to the staging location, and then you commit that if you wanted to. But like I said, I don't use command line for everything. I find it's easier to come over here to Team Explorer, go to Changes. Notice there's one change. Now here's the one thing I don't like about Team Explorer is that if you don't stage anything, it assumes everything is staged. I don't like that. I want to explicitly say this is staged. But if you right click on the file and say stage, that will put it into the stage changes. These are the changes that are going to go together into a commit. And a commit is a bundle of changes. In this case, we'll have just one change. And we're going to give a message for our commit. So it's the commit message up here. Now, the commit message, you don't want longer than 80 characters long per line. So I do use character terms, not just the automatic word wrap. And the first line is the subject line of an email. Okay, it's what shows up primarily. And so we want that to kind of summarize what the changes are. And we hit the enter key twice to leave a blank line, and then we put our message. So my initial commit message for this is add via solution file. Adds the blank solution for the Timco Retail Manager application. Pretty simple stuff. So I have my subject line or my commit header or primary message title, and then I have the body of the message right here. And I say commit staged. What this does is it will just create that commit locally. Now let's bring over real quick our command line. We'll clear it out and say get status again. And it says, okay, there's nothing to commit. The working tree is clean, meaning all of our changes have been bundled up. However, your branch is ahead of origin/master by one commit. You got a local change that you don't yet have in the remote repository. Okay, what that means is the file isn't here yet. If I refresh this, the solution file still isn't here. What I need to do is I need to sync it. Now, I can do a get pull and a get push on the command line here, or I can come over and click either sync here or click changes and go to sync. And I have a few options here. The easiest one, and the one that if you're working by yourself is the one that you'd most often use, is just to hit sync. What that will do is it will first pull the incoming commits, and then it will push your commits. So it pulls down first in case there's anything on the what we'll call the server. It's not really a server, but the remote repository. It pulls them down first in case there's anything we have to merge, meaning we've changed the same thing in both places. And again, the video I have on Git specifically on this channel will cover that in more depth, but essentially it's going to pull down, merge my changes with the changes from the server, and then it will push up to our server. We can't merge remotely. We must merge locally. So sync will do that. Now, I prefer, especially when I'm working on a team, to do what's called a fetch first. What a fetch will do is it will go out and see if there's any changes, find out what those changes are, and tell me, but not yet merge my stuff in. That allows me the extra step of seeing what's going to happen before something breaks. So I do a fetch, which there's going to be nothing there. And then I do a pull if there was changes, and then a push. Or I can just hit sync. So a sync, like I said, is going to do a fetch, or a pull, and then a push. And it just did those two things. And now if we open up our remote repository and hit refresh, we'll see we have two commits. One of them added the Timco Retail Manager solution file 3 minutes ago. Now, I did say that we wouldn't be doing much modification right in the server, but I do want to show you that really quick just so you can get used to it and how it works. I'm going to modify this just to put some spacing in this title. So if I hit the pencil icon over here to edit, I can now come up here and make changes right in line. I can even see what they look like. So it's going to look like this. This is what's in green. And the red right here is saying this is what's get removed. So that's the change. And I say, you know what? That's all you need to do. So I am going to hit this button right here, which looks like a paste icon. Or I can come down here and update or add a commit. So I come down here and I'm going to make a commit message and a body, or a title and a body. Now notice that this is a little cleaner, a little easier, but at the same time, it only allows me to modify one file at a time. Kind of a pain, but in this case, not a big deal. So update README file, and I'm going to say that this add proper spacing to the header. Something really simple. Now I have two options here. First of all, it asks me who I'm committing as, and that's I'm logged in as Tim at I am Tim Corey, so that's what it's defaulting to. And then I can either choose to commit directly to master, or I can create a new branch for this commit and start a pull request. We're not going to get into pull requests and new, we'll get into some branching a little bit, but not pull requests in this course, I don't think. But if you want more information on pull requests, my application lifecycle design course does have a lot of that in there. And my Git video will cover some of it, not pull requests, I don't believe. And I'll probably cover those in a future video as well. But with this, I'm going to create a commit directly to the master branch, and I hit commit changes. And there we go. One change has been made. We come back here, notice 3 commits, and 6 minutes ago I modified the solution or added the solution file, and then just now I modified the README file. And notice it says, when it says just now, it says the title of the commit that made the change. Update README file, add via solution file. And there's our spacing the way we want it. Now, back on my local machine, if I say get status, it says up to date with origin master. Not quite true. And that's where there's some commands you can run, but the easiest I find is, again, coming back to Visual Studio, if we say fetch, it's going to pull down that one change and say, oh, there's that change. It has not modified that file yet. If I were to open that file up, you would not see a change. But when I hit pull, it's going to bring that file in and make the change. Now we're up to date. So that's where it's really easy. It's a very quick process. But now I have my project and my files up to date with the server. So I open up the README file. Notice that spacing is in my file now. Okay, so that's it for this video. I'm going to try and keep these videos concise to just one thing at a time, not trying to do 2 or 3 or 4, even if we have time. So I'll split them up into separate videos for every single topic if I can. Okay, so that kind of wraps up setting up the source control and even getting our first couple of commits in place. So I hope that you found this valuable. Stay tuned for the next course or next video in this series. And as always, I am Tim Corey.